Hey guys, it's Miss Vinson. Today we're going to talk about a really special graph called the Production Possibilities Frontier. Now before we get into what the actual graph looks like, remember that economics is about choice, and so individuals have to make choices just like you and I, but so do whole countries. Remember the 4 factors of production that we talked about? Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. Every country has a different amount of resources. Some countries have a lot more people, some countries have a lot more land. So every country has to take a look at the resources that it has, and it has to decide what it's going to make, how much it's going to make, how are they going to produce it, and are they going to produce it for themselves to consume, or are they going to produce it for export? Now, who makes those decisions and answers those questions can be determined depending on what type of economy we're in. There are 2 main types of economies that we see in the world: command economies and market economies. Now in command economies, simply put, just think about some of the communist countries that you've learned about in history. In communist types of countries, the government makes all of the decisions about all aspects of society's life, whether it be cultural, educational, or even all the economic decisions. So in a command economy, there's 100% government involvement. A central authority makes all the decisions about what's going to be produced, how the resources are going to be used for the entire country. A market economy is the polar opposite of that. Now, a pure market economy would be 0% government involvement, meaning no taxes, no regulation, no assistance programs, and unfortunately, there's no historical example of an economy where the government has never been involved in it. But a market economy, just instead of a pure market economy, a market economy is really where buyers and sellers have the freedom to kind of run the show. So what's going to be produced really depends on what's hot and what's popular at that time. How is it going to be produced? Well, using the resources we can. So in a market economy, the decisions are made by individuals, by individual businesses, and by individual customers. So buyers and sellers pretty much run the show, almost kind of like eBay. If you think about eBay, eBay is sort of like an auction house. Buyers and sellers pretty much keep it going there. There's a little bit of degree of administrative involvement, and that's kind of how we are in the United States. We are pretty much a market economy, but sometimes people can consider us a mixed economy because we do have government involvement in the form of taxes. They do provide public goods for us. We talked about some of those transfer payments. So sometimes people are eligible to receive assistance if they can't compete in the market as well as others. So the 2 main types of economies that you need to be familiar with: command economy, that's 100% government involvement, and market economy. That's going to be less government involvement. That's going to be more individual buyers and sellers making the decisions for themselves. Now, the reason why we're talking about these choices for countries is because the Production Possibilities Frontier is a graph that shows how a country can use its resources to produce many different possible combinations of products. So let's talk about the graph itself. It's called the Production Possibilities Frontier. Some books call it the Production Possibilities Curve. Now, you can say a country could produce tractors, all right? Maybe we want to put that on the y-axis. And then on the x-axis, maybe a country could use its resources to produce corn, all right? So we would label our axes tractors and corn. So for Production Possibilities Frontier, we're actually labeling our x and y axis what we're actually measuring, the actual items. Now, if a country decides to use all of its resources towards nothing but the exclusive production of tractors, so they're using all of their land, all of their labor, all of their tools, everything, all of their resources going towards nothing but the exclusive production of tractors, then that means that they're going to be somewhere on the y-axis. They're going to be at a dot on the y-axis, which represents they're producing all tractors and no corn because all of their resources are going towards tractors. On the flip side, if they decide they want to produce only corn and they don't want to make any tractors at all, they're going to throw all their land, all their labor, all their capital, all their entrepreneurship down towards producing corn. Then that would put us at a point on the x-axis which shows that a country is using all of its resources to produce nothing except corn. No tractors, just corn. So these are two extremes. But what if the country wants a little bit of both, right? What if the country wants some tractors, but they also need to have some corn so they can eat? What if they want a combination of these two things? Well, what we're going to need to do on our graph is connect those two dots with a curve, all right? And that curve is going to be called our production possibilities frontier. Now, that curve, that line, represents the best that this country can do given all the resources. So if it uses every resource that it has, every worker, every tool, every square inch of land, they're going to be somewhere on that curve. This is a country working up to its full potential. So any point on that line represents something that we call productive efficiency. Any point on that line represents a country that is using all of its resources and nothing is sitting around idle and nothing is being wasted. So productive efficiency means that a country is maxing it out 100%. They're using everything they've got. So they are productively efficient if they are somewhere on that line. Now, which point is better, do you think? All tractors? All corn? A combination? Well, that really depends on what the country needs. If the country has a lot of hungry people, they're going to need to be more on the corn side, right? They need to feed a whole bunch of those people. If the country needs to harvest more corn, maybe they need to produce more tractors. Producing the right combination for a country is what we call allocative efficiency. This is going to be what society needs, so society's best output level. And that's different depending on the country's needs or the country's situation. So productively efficient means you're using all of your resources to the max, nothing's being wasted, you're on the line. Allocative efficiency means, are you producing what your country needs? Well, if your country needs more corn, I guess you need to go closer to the x-axis. If your country needs more tractors, maybe you need to move closer to the y-axis. So those are the concepts of productive and allocative efficiency. Those are going to follow us around through microeconomics. Now, any point on the line is efficient, a country using all of its resources 100%. But what if, for some reason, they're not using all of their resources? What if they're not using all of their workers? What if some workers are unemployed and they don't have a job and they're just sitting around? What if there's some land and it's not being used? What if there's some tools sitting around and people aren't using them? Anytime that a country is not fully using all of their resources, they're going to be at a point under the curve. And you can think about this as a country kind of falling short of its potential, like a country not working up to its potential. We call this inefficiency, because they have the ability to be able to produce way out there on that line if they used everything that they had. But they're not using everything. They're being wasteful. They're not being efficient with their resources. So any point under the curve represents an inefficient use of resources. And a good example is like unemployment. You have people in your country, but for some reason, they're not all working. So unemployment is a type of inefficiency. Now, if you put those people back to work, then you just move from a point under the line to a point on the line. You're finally using what you already have. But let's say that you actually get more people. Maybe there's a population boom, all right, in your country. Or maybe there's a surge of people that are moving into your country. So let's say that you actually have more of that resource of labor than you had before. If you physically have more people in your country than you had before, then that is going to shift your production possibilities frontier outwards to the right. All right? We call this economic growth. Economic growth happens whenever you obtain more land than you had before, more labor than you had before, more physical or human capital, or an increase in entrepreneurship. It also happens whenever there are advances in technology. When you get more of these resources or you have better technology, that allows you to be able to produce so much more than you previously could given your old amount of resources and your old technology. So economic growth is shown by your production possibilities frontier actually shifting out. So we would draw a whole nother production possibilities frontier that is out, and we would call that economic growth. Now, it's very important that you start labeling things on your graphs, guys. So you want to make sure that you have your X and Y axis labeled, and you want to make sure that you have your arrows showing what happened with your curves. You want to have arrows going out showing how your production possibilities frontier expanded. What about points that are beyond your production possibilities frontier? If there's a point that's beyond your production possibilities frontier, literally we say that is beyond our production possibilities, our capabilities at this time, given our resources and technology. We call those points unattainable at this time with our given resources and technology. In other words, we're saying, hey, given the stuff that we have right now, the amount of people we have working for us and our tools and our technology, we cannot produce that combination. But maybe one day that's going to change. Maybe we'll experience economic growth and our curve will shift outwards, and what was previously unattainable is now totally within the realm of possibility. Very quickly, let's talk about the difference between a straight line production possibilities frontier and a bowed out curved production possibilities frontier. You may have been wondering, when we connected those two dots between tractors and corn, why we didn't just draw a straight line, why we made it a bowed out curve. Well, there's a reason for that. If your production possibilities frontier is a straight line, then that means that it has a constant slope. We also call this constant opportunity cost. A straight line production possibilities frontier means that all of your resources are like interchangeable machine parts. It means that your resources are identical to each other. What this shows is that when you move resources over from the production of one good to another, like tractors to corn, how much you're giving up stays the same amount. So if all of our workers, in the time it takes them to make one tractor, they could have made 5 bushels of corn. If all of our workers had the same skill set, then it really doesn't matter what worker we move over to the corn factory. Because if we move one worker over to the corn factory, we're giving up one tractor. Move another worker over to the corn factory, we're giving up another tractor. And so that gives us constant opportunity cost. We're giving up the same amount every time we move a resource from the production of one good to the production of another. Our curve is not going to be a straight line. In reality, people do have different skill sets, and some resources and tools are better suited to the production of one thing versus another. So this bowed out production possibilities frontier shows the law of increasing opportunity cost. Basically, when we move resources over from the production of one good to another, at first, when we move a person over, maybe we're going to move over the person that's not really all that great at tractors. So we're not giving up that many tractors. But then, as we continue to move people over, we're going to start pulling people away from what they're really good at. And the more and more we move resources from one good to another, the more and more we have to sacrifice, because we're really starting to take people away from what they're skilled and what they're good at. And this is called increasing opportunity cost. So it just means that every time you move a resource over from the production of one good to another, the amount that you're having to sacrifice and give up increases. It grows more and more. And you can see that with a bowed out curve as opposed to a straight line production possibilities frontier. So we've talked about what this graph looks like. We've talked about what it means if there's a point on the line, that's productive efficiency. Under the line, that's inefficiency. Any point outside of the line is unattainable with our resources at this time. We've talked about economic growth. We've talked about how gaining more resources or getting better technology can actually shift the entire curve out. So now our production possibilities are greater. We've also talked about the difference between a straight line production possibilities frontier, which represents constant opportunity cost, and a bowed out production possibilities frontier, which is more realistic, which shows that you have to give up more and more as you switch your resources around. That's called increasing opportunity cost. Since this is our first graph, I hope it makes sense to you and that you find it really simple to look at and read and understand.